Hi everybody, shalom and welcome. I'm very glad you joined me on this fascinating journey in the footsteps of Jesus. I am Sagi Chaim Levi, an Israeli licensed tour guide specializing in Christian theology in Jerusalem and Israel. Pilgrims have come to Jerusalem continuously from the 4th century to present day. Throughout history, pilgrims saw their arrival to the holy city of Jerusalem and, following the last way of Jesus, a touch of the axis of the world, the center of the cosmos. According to this concept, in Jerusalem, heaven and earth met. For Christian pilgrims, a visit to Jerusalem and the way of the cross that ends in Calvary and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was and still is one of the summits of their lives. Yes, there is a devotional way in Jerusalem where millions of pilgrims contemplate and accompany Jesus in his last way, and they do so every day. This chapter will be an introduction to the way of suffering of Jesus and the Holy Sepulchre online course. In this chapter, we will talk about few topics. The Jewish temple in ancient times. We will explain what the temple was and what it meant to pilgrims in the time of Jesus. We will learn about Passover holiday during the time of Jesus and today, and how it's related to Jesus' last moments in Jerusalem. And we will talk about the Via Dolorosa and the 14 stations of the cross. Are you ready? Here we go. In order to understand Jesus, why he came to Jerusalem, what he did here, and how prophecies of the Old Testament connected to the New Testament, we must first understand the spirit of the era in Jesus' time and why Jesus came to Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. I have chosen the Davidson Center site for this part of the course because it offers a direct connection to the historical and spiritual significance of the Second Temple and the city of Jerusalem during Jesus' time. Here we stand before the remnants of the retaining wall that supported the Second Temple and walk on streets where Jesus may have walked. The site reveals the splendor of the ancient Jerusalem with the Robinson Arch right above me, mikvahs for purity, and wide steps leading to the Temple Plaza, all uncovered through an impressive archaeological excavation that revealed the city's glorious past. Although Jesus was obviously the most renowned pilgrim ever visit Jerusalem, he wasn't the only one. We want to understand how he felt as a pilgrim to Jerusalem and what was the meaning of the celebration for him. So much of what he did and said related to the Jewish pilgrimage at the time of Passover. The motives Jesus used as he talked take us directly to the Old Testament. Jerusalem, in the time of Jesus, was the cultural and governmental capital of the Jewish people in the province of Judea, one of many provinces of the Roman Empire. But above all, it was the spiritual and religious capital of the Jews. The core of Jerusalem was the Jewish temple on Temple Mount that represents the relationship between God and human beings for the Jews. The first temple, built by King Solomon around 3,000 years ago, is not only a place of worship, but also an historical site where sacred books were stored, including external and internal scrolls of the Bible. The Holy of Holiest was a specific room in the temple and was home to the Ark of the Covenant and the tablets of the Ten Commandments for nearly 500 years. However, in 586 BCE, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, burned the temple, and exiled the Hebrew people from Jerusalem and Judea. With the destruction, the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments were lost, a profound tragedy for the Jewish community. From that moment on, the Jewish people longed for the day when a new temple would be built in Jerusalem. Only 50 years later, under the Persian Empire, Cyrus the Great granted permission to approximately 50,000 Jews to return to their holy city Jerusalem and rebuild their lives and their temple. Construction of the Second Temple began immediately, though smaller and simpler compared to the Solomon's Temple or the later grandeur of Herod's Temple. It still held great significance. When the Second Temple was completed, it also contained a Holy of Holies, just like in Solomon's First Temple. But this time, it was empty of the Ark of the Covenant and the tablets of the Ten Commandments. In the 1st century BCE, King Herod the Great rebuilt the Second Temple, this time with immense fame and glory, making it a grand and magnificent structure. For the Jews, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem was the house of God, where the Shekhinah, which is the divine presence of God, dwells, until this very day. In English, the mount where the Jewish temple was located is called Temple Mount, but in Hebrew we call it Har Habayit, which means the mount of the house. The house of whom? The house of God. This is how Jesus referred to it and how we continue to call it until this very day, even though the temple was destroyed nearly 2,000 years ago by the Roman armies, about 40 years after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. Today, in this very same location of the temple, there is a Muslim shrine called Al-Aqsa Mosque, or the Golden Dome. We may film a tour in a different online course of the Temple Mount, which is just behind the Western Wall. Good morning. I am here at a viewpoint to the Temple Mount, and I came here early in the morning also to see with you, to watch with you the sunrise in the east. As we're overlooking to the east, you can also see the Western Wall, which is also the holiest place in the world for the Jewish people. And right above it, a little bit to the left, you can see the Dome of the Rock, which is the third holiest place in the world for Muslims, and the place where the temple, the Jewish temple, used to be 2,000 years ago until it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Look at the prayer right there. You can see the people are coming for sunrise prayer. Jewish people do it every day, meeting together, praying. And I came here for a specific reason, to watch from a bird's eye the place we were talking about. You can see Davidson Center and all the area of the streets and the markets right there. And now we're overlooking from the top. The Jewish temple was a place of spirituality for pilgrims like Jesus. According to the Jewish faith, the very stone under the temple is the cornerstone from which God started to create the world. And in this exact location, Abraham bound his son Isaac and almost sacrificed him some 3,500 years ago. The binding of Isaac will play a big role in the life of Jesus, or more so in the end of his life. We will speak about it in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Temple Mount is also called the Mount of Moriah. In this place, God made the first covenant with Abraham and his seed and gave Abraham the promise, "I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven." When Jesus made his way to Jerusalem at the age of 33, it was to celebrate Passover, one of the three major Jewish holidays. Jerusalem, being the holiest place for the Jewish people in Jesus' time and today, was and still is the center of those celebrations. It was a tradition for all Jews to make a pilgrimage all the way up to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the high holidays: Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. These pilgrimages were a key part of the Jewish religious life, drawing people from all over the world to this sacred city. When pilgrims came to Jerusalem and the Jewish temple, it was not only a spiritual journey. Jerusalem, during the time of Jesus, was a spectacular city, having been renovated over the years with Roman classical architecture. with its wide and lavish streets, colonnaded markets, and many public monuments that adorn the city. Public spaces like the Jewish temple and the surroundings of the temple compound were places of unparalleled beauty and splendor. Imagine the Second Temple, built by Herod the Great in the Roman style. It was one of the most magnificent structures of the ancient world. Herod expanded Temple Mount's size and grandeur, covering it with white marble and gold, making it a symbol of beauty and awe. At the same time, it was the largest prayer space in the world. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus described it as a breathtaking sight, gleaming brilliantly in the sun and visible from miles away. Its grandeur drew admiration from both Jews and non-Jews alike, and its scale was unmatched in the whole region. A pilgrim arriving at the Temple Mount would be overwhelmed by its power and beauty, especially if they came from a small village in the countryside. Every pilgrim who came to Jerusalem, whether from across the country or the far reaches of the world, was required to bring a sacrifice to the temple. Some pilgrims traveled from nearby towns, bringing their sacrificial animals with them, while others journeyed from distant places such as villages in the Galilee like Capernaum and Nazareth. But even from Europe, North Africa, and Asia, those who travel long distances would purchase their sacrificial animals in Jerusalem. As a result, there was a large, vibrant market around the temple where pilgrims could buy animals suitable for sacrifice. I can almost hear the bustling sounds of the market and catch the mix of scents of animals and incense in the air. Though I'm not entirely sure I would have enjoyed all the smell of the animals. But wealthy people could afford to buy a ram, lamb, or a goat, and the middle-class pilgrims spent less money and bought small pigeons and doves as a sacrifice in more economic prices. Of course, all of those animals were sacrificed on the altar in the temple by the priest, or in Hebrew, the Kohanim. Among other things, the priest conducted the ceremonies and the sacrifices in the temple and then shared the flesh of the sacrifice with pilgrims who came to Jerusalem. The pilgrims ate the sacrificed meat that the Kohanim shared with them to the sounds of music, drums, trumpets, and shofars. And of course, the sounds of thousands of people dancing, talking, and bargaining in the stores of the markets that we can see just behind me. Folks, it's not just the holidays, it was a tremendous festival. In Hebrew, the word Kohen stands for priest in English, and Kohanim is the plural of Kohen. Today, Kohen is the most common last name for Jews around the world. Yes, Kohen, just like the Cohen brothers that you all know. From the descriptions of historians from the time of Jesus, it is very easy to understand how the pilgrimage looked like and what the pilgrims did right before visiting the temple 2,000 years ago. Amazingly, baptism in the mikveh for the sake of purity is one of those rituals that Jews still practice today. There were and still are a variety of situations in which a Jew should be baptized. One of the reasons for Jewish baptism, you can see it in this very location. In this place, before visiting the temple, every Jewish pilgrim must maintain purity. How does it work? Before visiting the temple, every pilgrim had to purify himself in a ritual bath or any source of natural water. Since there is no river in Jerusalem, the pilgrims used the mikveh as they walked down to the ritual bath, which looked like a small swimming pool. The water in the mikveh was collected from the rainfall during the winter. As they walked up, they were purified and ready to dress up with white and festive clothing and ascend to the temple. Archaeological evidence showed dozens of public ritual baths that were located right next to the entrance of the temple and prove that all pilgrims purified themselves in the ritual bath or mikveh in Hebrew right before they ascended to the sacred area, to the temple. Jesus did the same when he came to Jerusalem, as this was the tradition of every Jewish pilgrim in Jesus' time. The priesthood who conducted the ceremonies were also responsible for the treasury of the temple and to collect the donations of pilgrims. We need to remember that part of the tradition of pilgrimage to Jerusalem during the time of Jesus was donating the half shekel tax to the temple money box. This money served the temple and the Jewish community. Think about it. So many Jewish pilgrims came from other countries or different provinces of the Roman Empire. The pilgrims came with foreign currencies. Just like today, tourists and pilgrims come to Jerusalem with the dollars and euros. Obviously, those pilgrims had to pay a visit to the money changers in the markets in order to change their currency to the local currency, the shekel. And they did it as well right before they entered the temple compound in order to donate the half shekel fee. Thus, the temple area became a financial center as well. And of course, where there is money involved, it is not always kosher. You know how it is. And money changers, like money changers, took their commission, and the closer you are to the temple, which is the highlight of the visit in Jerusalem, the commissions were higher, just like any visit to any touristic city all around the world, even today. And I know exactly what you have in mind. Jesus didn't like it. The episode of Jesus and the money changers is mentioned in all four Gospels, and it is described how Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. And he said to them, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." When Jesus is 33 years old, Jesus goes up to Jerusalem to fulfill a very important Jewish commandment, the commandment of pilgrimage. He did it with his 12 disciples, but probably many followed him. It is mentioned so many times in the Gospels. Jesus rose on Passover to Jerusalem as a pilgrim. But we understand from the Gospels that Jesus not only came to carry out the pilgrimage as every pilgrim, he wanted a change of heart in every person. Jesus taught, preached, and delivered sermons through parables and all prophecies of the covenant. Now, here's something remarkable. This particular stone, right in front of us, is believed by some scholars to be a place where Jesus himself may have stood as he entered the Temple Mount. Jesus frequently taught in the temple, and it's in this very area where he, along other rabbis, preached to the crowds who entered the temple. This stone holds a profound significance. It's not just another part of the ancient pathway. It could be the spot where Jesus actually walked, stood, and spoke. The view we see now may very well be the same view he saw as he entered the temple, surrounded by his followers. For many Christian pilgrims, this stone represents a deeply spiritual connection to Jesus, making this place incredibly special. There is a famous story about Neil Armstrong, the first man who walked on the moon. When he visited Israel after his historic trip, he was taken on a tour of the old city by the Israeli archaeologist Meir Bendov. When they arrived at the Hulda gates, Armstrong, deeply moved, asked, "So Jesus stepped right here?" Bendov replied, "Look, Jesus was a Jew," recalled Bendov. "These are the steps that led to the temple, so he must have walked here so many times." Armstrong, with an emotional expression, responded, "I have to tell you, I am more excited stepping on these stones than I was stepping on the moon." The Bible describes Jesus as a man of heart, a man of faith. He comes from the Galilee, where his relationship with God was the study of the scriptures and prayers. Suddenly, he comes to the temple and sees the wealth and the extravagance of Jerusalem, the pride and vanity of the leadership and the priesthood. Sacrifices are sold at exorbitant prices, overpriced taxes. It was a time where the people of Jerusalem demanded social justice. At this point, the high priest and the elders began to confront Jesus by words and questions. Mark 11:18, for they feared him because all the people were astonished at his doctrine. Jesus answered them in parables and wisdom, but as well confronted them in the most physical way possible. We all remember how he overturns the exchange tables and the tables of the dove sellers in the temple. It was a symbolic act. Jesus thinks that everything has to be reversed. In the kingdom of heaven, those who hold the high priesthood and the leadership positions will be replaced. According to the priesthood, Jesus is a reformer, and this is a big problem for the Orthodox leadership. In Jesus' eyes, he hasn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. By the way, when I say Orthodox, I refer to the real meaning of the word. It is a Greek word that means the straight and correct way. Every Orthodox group, Jewish or Christian, sees itself that way. Jesus is a strong and sweeping figure, a figure that thousands followed in his successful ministry in the Galilee. When he comes to the temple in Jerusalem and is not afraid to criticize what's going on over there, it threatens the priesthood, it threatens the establishment of the government, and the institutions are starting to feel under pressure. The fate of Jesus is the fate of many who shouted from the beginning of history, hypocrisy. We are tired of this corruption. The people demand the overthrow of the government. The priest couldn't execute and judge Jesus for his demand for justice and social reform, but they could influence whoever could judge him. And they handed him over to the Roman governor of the province of Judea, Pontius Pilate. I want to highlight another very important episode, the episode of the Last Supper. Most Christian denominations accept the tradition that the Last Supper took place on Mount Zion. Are you ready to visit it? Let's go. I am standing in the room of the Last Supper on Mount Zion. Some believe that this is the location of the Last Supper room. Although there is no solid archaeological evidence and the room itself was built in its final form only in the 14th century, it's an optional location and a traditional place for pilgrims to connect with the event of the Last Supper. The Last Supper is the Passover meal of the Jewish tradition. It is clearly mentioned in the Gospels. This supper was a defining moment in the life of Jesus that points to what's going to happen. We must understand the Jewish context of Passover celebration because these motives will recur constantly in our course. Jews have celebrated Passover for over 3,000 years. It is incredible for itself. Passover is one of the 3 high holidays. Before Jesus' time, it was the first holiday of the Hebrew calendar and marked the beginning of the year. Surely, the Passover is one of the most important days of the year for every Jew in Jesus' time and today. On Passover, Jewish families gather around the table for the Passover festive dinner until this very day. During the celebration, we tell parts of the story of Exodus, which is the story of the liberation of the Hebrew people from slavery under the Pharaoh's terrible rule and the escape to liberty. Pharaoh didn't want to let the people of Israel go at first, but God struck the 10 very painful plagues. The last and most painful plague was the death of the firstborn son in every house in Egypt. The Spirit of God passed from house to house, and every firstborn son died that night. Well, every firstborn in every house except the houses of the Hebrew slaves. The day before, Moses told the Israelites to sacrifice a lamb, then take a bunch of hyssop, which is a local plant, dip the branch in the blood of the sacrifice and mark the doorway of every house of the Hebrew people. This way, the Holy Spirit was able to pass over all Hebrew houses, and only the Egyptian firstborn died that night. In Jesus' time, the animals that were sacrificed in Jewish temple during Passover were for a few reasons. One of them is to remember the sacrifice the Israelites made in Egypt in order for God to pass over their houses. After the awful night of the last plague where the firstborn of every Egyptian family died, Pharaoh released the Hebrew slaves. For Jewish people, this is the reason we call that night Passover, because God passed over the doorway of the Hebrew people. One of the ways to commemorate the event is the celebration of Passover supper every year. Another way to commemorate the Passover event is the mezuzah, which is placed on every doorstep of every Jewish family. The mezuzah commemorates the sign that Hebrews made on their doorstep in Egypt as a symbol for God's protection. One of the blessings the Jewish bless on Passover night is every Jew must see himself as if he came out of Egypt. This very same blessing was said by Jews in Jesus' time and probably by Jesus in the Last Supper. I have to admit, when I see all the Christian pilgrims walking in the last way of Jesus in Jerusalem and visiting the Holy Sepulchre, Calvary, and the tomb of Jesus, when they associate with the suffering of Christ, it seems like they say every Christian must see himself as he was walking to the cross. As one must sometimes sacrifice his own desires for a bigger global cause. In the Passover festive dinner, a part of telling the story of Exodus, every year we must drink 4 cups of wine and eat unleavened bread, which we call matzah. Jesus and the disciples did exactly the same. While they were eating, Jesus took the matzah bread, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Then he took a cup of wine and they all drank from it. And Jesus said, "This is my blood." Folks, 2 billion Christians all over the world having Mass or Holy Communion every Sunday and holidays as if they were in Passover dinner 2,000 years ago, raising the Spirit of Jesus while eating Jesus' body and drinking His blood. I want to talk about where Judas betrayed Jesus and take you to the actual place where it's happened. Let's go to Gethsemane. This garden in the Garden of Gethsemane is an orchard of olive trees. And the olives I'm holding over here are olives that are harvested every year in this season. And eventually they will be pressed right here on the Mount of Olives. The olive oil will be sent to the Vatican and eventually to the Pope. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Bye.
God bless you.
Thank you.
During the Last Supper, Jesus foretold prophecies several times, and all his prophecies were fulfilled. He told the 12 apostles that one of them will betray him, and they all asked him, "Is it me? Is it me?" Jesus also predicts Peter's denial. "I am sitting here in Gethsemane, at the foot of the Mount of Olives, just outside of the ancient walls of Jerusalem. It is a place of profound spiritual and historical significance. This garden is believed to be the very spot where Jesus came to pray the night before his crucifixion. According to the Gospels, this is where Jesus experienced deep anguish, fully aware of the suffering that lay ahead. It was also here, in this peaceful setting, that he was betrayed by Judas and was arrested. The name Gethsemane comes from the 2 Hebrew words, Gat Shmanim, meaning oil press, indicating the garden's ancient use for pressing olives, an essential activity in biblical times. As we stand here today, the garden is still filled with young and ancient olive trees. some of which are believed to be branches of olive trees that stood here during Jesus' time. For Christians, Gethsemane is not just a site, but a place of reflection, which represents the human aspect of Jesus in his fear and suffering, and his ultimate submission to God's will. Just behind us is the Church of All Nations, which is also called the Basilica of Agony, built over a rock where, according to the tradition, Jesus prayed on that fateful night. This garden, with its calm olive-shaded path, is a contrast to the intense and dramatic events that unfold here. Despite its peaceful beauty, Gethsemane remains a place of deep sorrow and spiritual struggle. After the festive Passover supper, Jesus came here with his disciples and said to them, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." He took Peter, James, and John with him. It was one of the most sorrowful moments in Jesus' life, as he prayed, speaking to God with a heavy heart, feeling the weight of what was to come. He even asked, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." Jesus woke them 3 times, saying, "Could you not watch with me for 1 hour?" Some might understand the disciples' sleepiness, trying to stay awake after a big Passover meal and 4 cups of wine in the middle of the night. It might not be such an easy task, but there is a deeper meaning to this act. Some say they fell asleep out of sorrow, a feeling we can all relate to in hard times. The Bible teaches us that in our darkest moments, we must resist the temptation to fall into despair, to keep awake and hold on to our faith. That night, after Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane, the pivotal moment arrived. Judas kissed Jesus and betrayed him, and the soldiers arrested Jesus, taking him to the house of the high priest, Caiaphas. There, he was judged before the chief priest, elders, and the council, accused of claiming to be the Messiah and the Son of God. For those who did not accept Jesus' message, such a claim was considered blasphemy. That was the moment where Peter denied Jesus 3 times. After that trial and few hours in the dungeon, the priest handed Jesus to Pontius Pilate, where his fate would be sealed on that fateful Friday morning. We are in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City, where the Via Dolorosa begins its winding path through the narrow streets, eventually leading to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. As we stand here at station number 1 of the Via Dolorosa, we are at the very start of one of the most significant journeys in Christian traditions, the path Jesus took on his way to crucifixion. This place marks the site where Pontius Pilate, under the pressure from the crowd, sentenced Jesus to death. According to the New Testament, Pilate appears reluctant to condemn Jesus, but the Jewish mob demanded his crucifixion. Here, Jesus was found guilty, tortured, and sent on his journey to Calvary through the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. Historically, this site is believed to be the location of the Antonia Fortress, a Roman military stronghold where Jesus was brought before Pilate for judgment. It is a place of deep sorrow, but also of immense significance, marking the beginning of Christ's final journey. Today, the compound is under the care of the Franciscan Catholic Order and houses 2 churches, a monastery, and a museum, all dedicated to preserving the memory of these sacred events. Those of you who haven't been to Jerusalem yet or haven't heard about the Via Dolorosa before might not know that from the 4th century, pilgrims who visit Jerusalem follow a path which we call in Latin the Via Dolorosa. Is an actual way in the streets of Jerusalem that starts in the alleged place of judgment of Jesus, the Praetorium, and follows 14 stations of all the way to the place of burial and resurrection of Jesus. In each one of the 14 stations, we commemorate an event that happened to Jesus in Jerusalem and mentioned in the New Testament, or an event which is considered to be a Christian tradition. In a different online course, I will take you on an in-depth tour of the streets of Jerusalem, and we will follow together the footsteps of Jesus through the way of the cross and the stations of the Via Dolorosa. In this online course, I will focus on the last part of the Via Dolorosa and the way of suffering of Jesus. We will visit and learn about Calvary, the tomb of Jesus, the anointment stone, and many other sites which are mostly inside the Holy Sepulchre Church, the most sacred site in the Christian world and located in the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. So here, from the first station of the Way of the Cross, the first episode ends. And in the next chapter, I will talk about Golgotha and uncover the true location of Calvary and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Until the next episode, take care and may you walk only in good path. Segi Levi from Jerusalem.